Hello, everyone.
Hey.
It's lovely to see you all here. And for quick introductions, because I'd rather you introduce yourself than me introduce you, totally takes pressure off me for one part, but also it's ever changing. So if y'all could give a quick introduction and maybe how do you Nuxt? Like, what you use with Nuxt or your favorite part of Nuxt or how you found Nuxt. Like it's a very open. Trying to ask somebody about that, how do you Kafka is also a very weird question to ask people. So I'm just going with the flow on that one. And I'm going to pick on Sébastien. Do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I'm Sébastien. I created Nuxt in October 2016, so 7 years ago now. I use Nuxt every day since then. And my favorite feature is the pages directory. And now since Nuxt 3, the app.vue file. And that's all for me. I think I can give the mic to Pooya.
Sure. Thanks, everyone. My name is Pooya. I think I joined Nuxt almost 6 years ago or something like that. I'm super proud working with Sébastien and also people like Daniel and Alex so far. And the question, how do I like Nuxt? Maybe Nuxt layers and server. I think Nuxt layers is going to be something really powerful.
Very cool.
Next, Alex?
Yes. I can just give that back to you. I really, to everybody, enjoy working with everyone new at on Nuxt. I'm on the Nuxt team as well since I think 2018. Back then, Vue.js London was still very lovely, like 5 years ago. Other than that, I am not working open source full time. I'm a web engineering consultant and also do some content around Nuxt, Vue, and all that. And what I like most about Nuxt, I think I could name lots of features, but to be honest, I really enjoy the community, the spirit, all of the people working together, and I think that's really the best.
Yay! Thank you.
And I think I'm probably the newest member of the Nuxt team in that case. Relatively recently that I joined the team and started helping out. My favorite way to Nuxt, it's probably going to be in a sandbox in terms of frequency of what I actually do. But the feature I love best is type-safe server routes. So being able to get that inference in your editor, and coming soon, type-safe body and params as well when making those fetch requests. That's definitely something I think where the DX and the engineering to make it possible just marry very nicely. I like it a lot.
Yay. Thank you, everyone. All right. To jump into all of the questions of what is your vision for what Nuxt will be in 2024? I feel like Seb already answered this question, so you don't have to go with that one. Okay. Alex, you're making the most movement, so
I'm happy to go first. I think adoption will rise. More than sure about that, especially with all the amazing features. I see lots of people being very jealous in a way of the dev tools. Also seeing that will expand to other ecosystems in the future, maybe. But still, I think there will be more innovation. I hope that also we will go more in the direction of reducing the amount of JavaScript needed, especially server components, the whole part of partial laser hydration, that will improve to reduce the performance, or improve the performance and reduce the JavaScript needed to make it even more accessible on many more devices. And I hope that we will keep up with the developer experience. I'm more than sure, actually.
Anything else anyone wants to add before I go to the next question?
I'm just going to put it out there. Nuxt 4 is what I expect to see in 2024. And I expect to see a nice migration. So, hopefully the first of many smooth migrations that are going to bring people a lot of pleasure rather than any pain at all. That's what I want to see in 2024, alongside all those other amazing things that people have mentioned.
That's a good one.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Next question. Can I go next question? Nuxt docs are confusing when it comes to using modules with TypeScript. How can import modules and then use them in TypeScript?
I'll let Daniel answer for this.
I'm not actually even sure what 100% what is being asked. But if we're talking about Nuxt modules, then you can use Nuxt modules locally in your project in TypeScript. You can just create a modules directory, and any file in there can be written in TypeScript and can be imported pretty straightforwardly. If you're publishing a Nuxt module to NPM, we'd recommend compiling it. We have a module builder CLI, so the Nuxt module builder. Use that. There's a template as well that will get you started with Nuxy. And if you're talking about, if you're talking about something else, do say, because I'd be happy to answer that question as well. But hopefully that was what you were going for.
Also, maybe to mention that if there are types from module, then a module can also provide types. So that should be pretty straightforward to use.
The only thing that when I read this, it also made me think about Daniel's talk during TypeScript Congress, and maybe it's stemming from something there. I'm not quite sure. All right, next question of what's going on with the Nuxt auth model?
Okay, then I think I have to pick on it because me and Sébastien was working for basically a new vision of auth modules for a long time. I think it's now more than a year. And actually, there was reasons behind it. Because what we made for Nuxt 2, basically for Nuxt 1, I started as basically extracting as a module. It was one of the first modules in Nuxt itself. That was one of the reasons that we introduced Nuxt modules to support us. And over the years, it was making life for many developers much, much easier. I think it was also inspiration for other frameworks that now they have multi-provider authentication support. But one of the main things that we wanted to focus on Nuxt 3 was to make sure that Nuxt itself is powerful enough and capable enough to make custom authentication solutions. Because obviously it's easy to get started with implementing some auth, and we really want to make it possible for users. But as soon as the project really grows, we have some different customizations. It's harder when we use just an out-of-the-box solution that is not customizable. So that was our main focus for last year, to make sure that instead of making a similar thing that we had in Nuxt 2, but we improved in the core of the Nuxt to make sure we have infrastructure for making authentication solutions, like you saw in the previous presentations. How easy is it to integrate any authentication provider? We are working to make and provide a solution basically to make life easier again. And it's going to be more helpful, some presets of a combination of the utilities that already Nuxt have to make authentication solutions. The reason that there is no ETA for it for now is that we are still investigating to make sure that it is customizable enough for the future. As Daniel mentioned, we don't want to make a slower migration path again. So we want to make sure that when we introduce this feature, it's going to roll with Nuxt, Nuxt 4, Nuxt 5, and later versions, and people can easily try to build things on top of it. But I can promise you, we are really working on it, and basically, I think almost every week we are talking with Sébastien about progress on it, and I hope to open source it as soon as possible.
Yay, thank you. And this next question is going to be a what's the status as well of Vue transition? How's Vue transition looking?
So Vue transitions, so I use it. I'd happily use that on a production website. A lot of the features in the experimental section of Nuxt config are there primarily for API considerations. Vue transitions is experimental more because Vue transitions themselves don't have wide adoption. And so you might want to decide in your project, for example, not to add the code that's going to trigger Vue transitions. The other thing is that Vue transitions, by default, will cause your pages to fade out and fade in on every transition. That's browser behavior, and we think it requires user opt-in. However, this likely shouldn't be under the experimental namespace. I'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow. It's more likely to be in a features or future namespace, because this is something that you might want to turn on or off. It's not experimental as such, but we didn't want to opt people into it too soon before there is wide browser support.
Thank you. And it does make me think about accessibility as well with the transitions. And so thank you again for giving us more details there. How about server-only components like islands in production apps? Anybody have details about if people can start using that?
Absolutely. So again, I think with, so this is one that's going to see more changes. So you'll see more changes in terms of refactoring our internal implementation. However, I would personally very happily use server-only components in your production apps. Just make sure to write a test to cover that use case and make sure to pin the dependency. But that's true whenever you use any feature. But the actual implementation is solid. So if you're implementing it, it should work well for you.
Also, maybe to add on all the experimental features, it's always important that experimental doesn't mean unstable or might not work as expected. It's more like the API could change or some underlying dependencies might still have to align. So yeah, as Daniel said, testing, pinning the versions, you're good to go.
That's a great call out. Thank you. All right. And I feel like this might have been touched on earlier today about adding an official ORM to Nuxt. So any more details there?
Okay, I'm not going to 100% promise it to be announced tomorrow, but there is a really high chance that I live code to release the solution that we are going to make. Just to rest you assured, similar to any other feature that we consider for the Nuxt stack, is going to be an open integration. So we are not enforcing Nuxt ORM basically out of the box, but default and standard connectors, as well as a standard schema layer for connecting to the databases. And our main goal is to, instead of reinventing the Vue, basically to create a new ORM, is to integrate with the well-known ORMs. So with almost no configuration, Nuxt could be integrated with any popular or favorite ORM that people have.
Great. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to pick on Alex just because we haven't picked on you very much yet. Of what models should someone definitely be using in their next projects? I wanted to go to everybody, but I'm picking on Alex first just because you haven't. All my questions have been going to them.
There are quite some modules. Let's say Nuxt image is a no-brainer, right? Also with the auto install that comes up. I think that you definitely should use that. Same goes for the dev tools. They're not like strictly installing it for a module, but it totally makes sense. And I think besides these, the Vue use module is lovely to add some auto imports. I think I reach out to use Vue use in almost any project. And regarding SEO, I think everything from Nuxt SEO, so everything that Harlan does should be added as well. I think, yeah, out of top of my head, that would be that.
All right, Daniel, Pooya, anything you'd like to add to those?
I pretty much always use Tailwind CSS or Uno CSS. Those are definitely modules to use. I would always use Fontaine as well. Obviously, I'm going to do that, but it has almost no overhead, just positive. So I would reach for that. I would also use something like HTML Validator, which will check the validity of the HTML that you write and can help address some hydration issues. Also check out Alex's blog for more hydration debugging, by the way. And one experimental module, if you're experiencing hydration issues that you should definitely try, is by Julian Huang, Nuxt Hydration. There's some really interesting abilities it has, so check that out too. But honestly, if you want to see what modules we would add, check out our websites, because you'll see the modules we actually do add. So check out Nuxt.com, it's just been open sourced, elk.zone. Check out Alex's website, which has just been rebuilt, and mine, which is highly experimental and has lots of custom local modules.
Really cool stuff there, especially in yours, Daniel.
Really crazy stuff in my website. Pooya, actually, I'm not sure I have seen your website recently, but maybe it's being rewritten.
Well, it's what I'm trying to make is actually unofficial, but I'm having a hobby project. I'm trying to run my website out of a floppy disk. So basically, to try to reduce everything possible to make it like old school, but as minimal as possible. So that's something I want to announce maybe in a few months when I can.
That's pretty cool.
That's something I'm working on.
That's amazing. Yeah, for floppy disk. And at the moment, you have a Raspberry Pi, don't you, running? So I'm not sure if it's serving your website, but you definitely have a server running on a Raspberry Pi and running Linux on a Raspberry Pi, or running Nuxt on a Raspberry Pi. Is that right?
Yes, I think multiple instances of it.
Yeah.
I also have
Smooth.
3 phones here. I was actually today trying with this and this iPhone. So I run JS on all of them. I mean, you can run Nuxt almost everywhere now, especially in your browser using StackBlitz.
Who needs a VM? Who needs a serverless platform when you have a phone that you can plug in?
All right. I thank you everyone for that. And I think this is a big question that has been coming up. It came up, I believe, in Michael's session. And I'm curious if any of you have experience with this. I know I'm giving you a lot of detail before showing you the question of how does Nuxt compare with Astro? Have you all tried Astro yet? Like to compare? Building Astro building upon Nuxt, like with integrations, like what are your thoughts around comparing Nuxt with Astro?
I mean, Astro has, we share a lot of values, I think, that are quite similar. So Astro really prioritized good developer experience, and so do we. I think Astro are also really friendly, and I'd like to think we are too. So we have, really nice communities. There's obviously different approaches and also different targets in terms of what the projects are meant for. Astro really launched targeting static sites. There've been lots of developers who built their portfolios on Astro. At Nuxt, we're aiming, I think, a little bit more broadly to be able to have static sites, but also people have, enterprise apps. But I don't mean that as a negative on Astro. It's great as well.
Yeah, I think to add, also Astro going all the way down to like island architecture and partial hydration, like just hydrate the part you actually need, reactive islands. I think it's also something that we want to pursue in the future, especially now with server components up and running, which is kind of the inverse of it, but laying the foundation for even more there and having a chance to also have all the benefits of that, but also saying, okay, that's only for a part of the application, but the dashboard part of the app can still run as an SPA, or these parts can be like be a full-blown server-side rendered application. So I think we also share an idea of what paradigms to support, but as Daniel said, it's about more broad vision and incorporating all the patterns that might be useful for a bigger site.
Pooya, anything you want to add to this one?
I think it was good explanation by both.
I agree. I think both your explanations were great. And as somebody that's had Nuxt on my show and Astro on my show, I can agree with Daniel. All of you are very, very friendly. And it is something that I think that's a great way to showcase how you said that it's two different use cases, which is I think a good way of thinking about some of these things, because sometimes people can think that they're the same from just looking at them briefly. So you both captured that very well. Thank you. All right. Next question. Is there any possibility to make error handling in a plugin if an error is thrown outside the setup? For example, composables or any other file rather than Vue components? I know it's a long one.
So I mean, error handling is tricky just in terms of thinking about browser APIs in general. So if an error is thrown in, for example, an async function that's called and never awaited, that error goes nowhere. It's never caught. If that async function is awaited, then it will be caught, at that point. But it's really common that people might just throw an error. So if you have an error handler on a button click, it throws an error. Nothing catches that error. It's just out there, alone in the world. And so in general, Nuxt won't know that there are errors floating around in your app. We'd have to integrate with Nuxt. So the way you do that is if an error is thrown in when Vue is rendering your page, it will be caught and processed by Vue's error handler, and there are some Nuxt error handling hooks that will pick it up at that point because Vue catches it and passes it along to us, and that error is then tenderly looked after and cared for by you as a developer in a way that it can't be if it's just unhandled. If you are in a situation where nothing is going to catch the error, then you yourself can handle it using the show error or use error composables that Nuxt makes possible. So don't just throw the error if it's like attached to a button click. You can actually show an error page, or you can modify the global error object with use error. That would be up to you to do that. Nuxt isn't, or any framework isn't going to be able to catch unhandled errors in that way. I don't know if Alex or Pooya has anything else to add to that.
And from the top of my head, also only that, of course, if you, let's say, have another file, another JavaScript, TypeScript file, you kind of import a function and call in a Vue component. And of course, you can catch the error there as well. And besides that, to have some more like fine-grained error handling mechanism, you can also use the Nuxt error boundary component, which is also very lovely to avoid like showing, oh, everything's broken just because, I don't know, a request to get the newest post failed. Just show, hey, that request didn't work, just refresh it. But yeah, error handling can get quite complex when you go from, oh, everything breaks as soon as some error will be thrown and I don't care, to I want to handle very fine granularly. And other than that, I would also say it always is worth to track your errors with whatever service you want to use, just to make sure that you can't test all the devices, all the user settings with all their browser extensions. So make sure that you have some kind of service that tells you what errors users experience.
Yes, thank you. All right, next question is Nuxt extends. What's the latest updates?
Well, there will be talk about that as well during Next Nation, so that might be worth.
I know.
About.
I was like, there. A lot of these are just teasers for upcoming talks. All right.
I think there are two small updates about Nuxt extends. I think it's probably going to be released tonight, but alongside with Nuxt 3.8. So with the Nuxt extends and Nuxt layers, basically, we wasn't extending node modules of the parent project. So as I would say, a significant major improvement in the Nuxt extends support. In the next version, we clone the layers now in the node modules. So you can reuse the dependencies of the main project. We will add an opt-in feature for auto-installing the dependencies of layers when cloning from GitHub, and also more authentication mechanisms. So they are small updates, but since internally with development of the things, even like Nuxt.com website itself, we are improving Nuxt extends progressively, and these kind of updates are coming to it.
It's also worth saying that there are a number of other layer updates and fixes that are included in 3.8. So small kind of things, such as making it possible to override plugins and middleware and in a more intuitive and, in fact, correct way. So we fixed the bugs there, and some other things along those lines. A lot around the extendability of that sort of core app. And so if you check the changelog for Nuxt 3.8, or read the release article when it's out there, you'll see some stuff that is there.
I think also it makes sense to follow the tracker issue for everything regarding layers and extents. So that's always a good one. I'll post it in chat in a bit.
And if you follow a tracker issue, in general, the tracker issue is not the place to report bugs. The tracker issue is for people to understand the big picture of what's going on. And if you're encountering a bug, please open a new issue, because every single person who's interested in layers will receive your comment, which says it's not working for me. Yeah. So yeah, new issues, tracker issues, great to follow and subscribe to.
Very good remark.
Good to know. Good to know. Now that Nuxt Studio has officially launched, what will the plans for Nuxt content, and will there be plans to merge the two?
So Nuxt Studio is a paid SaaS product. Nuxt content is an open source project, and they're not being merged. I think that is important to say. I think Nuxt Studio builds on Nuxt content, so it uses the capabilities that Nuxt content gives anybody, and it does that. Hopefully, people will enjoy it and find Nuxt Studio is a great experience. But they are separate projects.
That's a great call out. Thank you. Where do you put your use fetch calls if you need to receive data in multiple components and pages?
The same data, or that's a broad question in a way.
If it's the same data, what would you do? And if it's different data, what would you do?
Well, if it's different data, then just place it wherever you need the data to fetch that, right? And if it's the same data, there was a very nice PR that I saw Daniel editing and merging on stream recently about how if you need the same data in multiple components, you can, well, ensure that it won't be refetched necessarily with get cache data. And you can also use something like has Nuxt data to check if their data, get them there. So that can also help. Or even like building an own composable around that and use that. And then ensuring that you don't do multiple calls again and again if the data is already there.
So again, like there are lots of ways to think about data fetching. So is the data reactive? Will you be refreshing it from time to time? Is it the kind of thing that you, if it's something like a navigation, like the navigation for your site where you fetch it really once and you might use it lots of places, then you might not, you might actually just fetch it once in a plugin and assign it to the state of your app rather than including it in the payload. It's not really a page specific information. So there's some other thing, there's some questions here. But the shout out of creating a custom composable, like use my data, which is just a pre-configured use fetch, is really strong. That's a very strong choice. But there are some other just app architecture questions. In general, you want to do things like avoid waterfalls. If you can prefetch the data you're going to need, and then have a composable to access it, for example, that could be a good way of doing it.
Thank you. And Alex brought up something that stood out to me is, y'all, Daniel, if you didn't know this, had live streams a lot of this. And so it's a great place to stay up to date on this. So definitely go check it out on Twitch. I'm pretty sure your username is Daniel Rowe, right? Yeah.
I don't have any anonymity thing going on online, I will say that. And I'm nothing if not consistent. So I think only Twitter is different. And that's because I couldn't get the Daniel Rowe handle.
I can relate to that. Also, the link is once again in the chat everywhere. So if you want to follow Daniel, do that right away. They're everywhere.
Yes, I did. I will say I did while we were having technical issues to begin with. I started talking about you being on my show, Daniel, because it was me learning about Nuxt and the dev tools. I just love the dev tools. All right, next question of Will server components show up in the DevTools component tree with the ability to edit and test props, or is there some impact on the current DX?
This is a great question and probably deserves to be an issue in DevTools to track if it doesn't already exist. So at the moment, server components show up with the ability to inspect and jump to. So you still get that even if they're server components, because that is purely powered by the HTML that's rendered by the component. But the ability to edit and test props might not be, it was something we can look at. For example, we currently support HMR for server components. So if you edit a server component, it will live reload on client side. And we do that ourselves with custom HMR events, because there is no JavaScript representing that code in your client base, even in dev mode. And it might be that there's similar stuff we can do for DevTools. But right now, no. Right now, it's a static HTML. It's not going to show you the component or allow you to edit its props directly.
Maybe you could even address this in either the Vue DevTools or also the Nuxt DevTools. Depends on how, where it fits best and how Vue DevTools and Nuxt DevTools will lie in the future.
I know, that's so exciting. I'm very excited about the DevTools. Like, that is something I'm just really excited about. But when to use composables versus plugins in Nuxt 3, and where and when would you load global data for app for the SSG build?
I mean, these are two separate questions in the end.
Yeah, I was like, I'm reading this and I'm like, wait a minute.
Somebody sneaked 2 and 1 in here.
Yes.
I think I might just pick the first one, when to use composables versus plugins in Nuxt 3. And I mean, a plugin runs once, like when basically per request. So like you start the application, you hit the URL, then the plugin might run server or client side. Depends on how you configure it, both, whatever. And for example, you say, hey, provide some helper methods, initialize some things, set some things to the meta tags. So do something that should just be done once per request, and then the app is set and ready, and then you can do stuff. While composables, of course, are more meant for state that should be handled. Like, I don't know, you have some use toast composable that handles, I have some notifications, how to add them, should I remove them, how to access them to display them. And of course, same for data fetching. You have data, a status, if it's like pending, if it's fetched, if it's not there, if there's an error. So I think these are two vastly different use cases. And that's when I would use either of them.
Any other adds to question number 1? Cool. And where and when would you load global data for an app for the SSG build?
So I know I would do it. I would be looking to utilize stuff like the unstorage in your Nitro instance, because you can fetch something once and not refetch it on subsequent page generations. And so you can basically fetch something once, store it in an unstorage key, and then use it in your generated pages to fill some state or async data call in your client-side app. So you don't have to load it in a separate place. You don't have to load it outside of your app. You don't have to load it in the Nuxt config, although you could do that in a module. You can actually do it in your runtime code in such a way that it doesn't add to your bundle. So that is possible.
I think we would need an example for that, though, because I think lots of people are missing out on these amazing opportunities. I use that pattern as well already, and I noticed I don't think you have something up and running to showcase that, right?
No, I don't think so. I think you're right. That would be a great example.
Noting down.
If only we had, someone here who creates great articles and videos.
Well, I know quite some people here.
just to be clear, I'm talking about. I mean, No, actually, that's true. I'm not.
That's the thing.
I
Yeah.
was meaning it as a compliment to you, Alex, but actually, it's true. It's true of also
Thanks.
Jen and Pooya. So
We all do.
We can do a group one. It'll be fun
Yeah.
and that much harder trying to get all of us to do it together. All right. Next question of what is the future of layers? They really want to see this feature as an application structure builder where they can define different types of layers. For example, scoop layers, which do not expose anything. So what's the future of layers?
Well, this looks like a really interesting feature request, and I think I would love to see it as an issue so it doesn't get lost in this discussion. And I have lots of questions actually about this in terms of scope layers. You can see the plans for layers in the documentation and the issue tracker we linked earlier, and definitely check those out. There are only a few issues though still on the list of things to be ticked off. Probably the most significant one of which, in terms of DX, is the one Pooya is planning on fixing. It sounds like later tonight, which I don't want to overpromise. I don't think that was the promise, but yeah, I would love to see this. I don't know, Pooya, do you know what the question is getting at?
I can kind of guess the problem. So basically, layers can extend a project, right? So we can add some base features that are common across projects, maybe as a template. But when it comes to split the Nuxt project into smaller parts, for example, if it's a web shop, we want to separate the cart from the landing and product listing page. And when it comes to work across different teams, sometimes it's challenging because when we extend from a layer, every composable and also imported composable, every feature like that would be sharing the same namespace for naming. So if two teams use the same composable, same auto import feature, they are possibly going to be conflicted together. And it was actually something we kind of discussed also with Daniel. It is partially implemented. So for the path, we isolate them per layer, but we was also thinking how we can also isolate the other features such as auto imports, basically everything magical to be isolated. And this way teams can work together without worrying about conflicting with two different layers. It's a little bit tricky to give a precise answer. I think as Sim Daniel was kind of confused because there's a clear answer to this. But I think it was something for a long time since Nuxt 1. I think even there was a POC for supporting multi-applications. That's something we definitely want to have, but it's kind of a tricky situation to figure out the best way to do this.
And actually, some of those things might also be addressed by something Pooya and I have also been talking about, which is multi-app support, where you do have that sort of built-in scoping. You have to have that.
So like micro frontends the Nuxt way.
Yeah, micro frontends reimagined.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, also link that issue.
Conference talk.
Yeah, please. I really want to see that. I would love to join. Also link that issue, which doesn't contain much except it's TBA. But once again, if you're interested in that, just subscribe to that. And as soon as someone asks when it's ready, you'll be notified. And when we give new info, of course.
Great. Thank you. All right. Next question. Will we be getting Pinia store context and server routes, API routes without writing a plugin like we had with Vuex context on the server side in Nuxt 2? And I see Alex shaking his head no.
Oh, I mean, in server routes, so everything inside the server folder runs before your Nuxt application is like for that request, like ready to get all the things. So don't try use any Vue composables in there. Don't try use, hey, can I use Pinia in there? Not really. So that's really more designed in, hey, I want to do some API. I want to write my own API, or want to, I don't know, for example, for server routes, I want to deliver a feed.xml and don't want to have it under API feed.xml because why? So I think that should be handled in the Nuxt part. So everything else except the server folder. And of course, there on the server side, you can use async data together with whatever in your Pinia store initializes the store, saying you have like a user store, and then say you have some async function that fetches the user from an API. Then you can use that together with use async data to get the store up and ready, and also send the data from the server to the client.
Great, thank you. All right, next question would you consider beta releases for minor releases? This could avoid some of the developer experience impacts the 3.7.0 line is having with the new Nuxt CLI compared to 3.6.5.
I would consider that, yeah. I mean, at the moment, I would recommend you check out the nightly releases, because you can actually test these in advance. We also have an ecosystem CI which tests everything before release. So any test suite which is added to the ecosystem CI, we can check, which will obviously be restricted to open source ones. So that will probably not be your project. But if you're maintaining a library and this affects you, you can add it, and we can just ensure your test suite passes before we release the new version of Nuxt. But I mean, having said that, even though everything is out there right now for you to already test that, I would consider a pre-release, largely because our rhythm is basically once a month for minor releases. That doesn't give a lot of time for pre-releases or beta releases, I've got to say. But we have lengthened, so it's once a week for patches, and then once a month for minor, maybe a little bit more than once a month for minor releases. But before a minor release, we now take at least 2 weeks. So it feels to me like maybe doing a beta release, a week before or a few days before is totally reasonable. But it's unclear to me right now whether that will stick around. We could try it.
I think trying it out makes sense. But I agree, like, are there many people that will test the pre-release versus just using nightly straight away in these 2 weeks, or just saying, hey, I'm on nightly anyway? But yeah, I think it would be an experiment worth trying, and check how many people actually use that.
So if this is you and you would try it, then please let us know. That would be good to know. Obviously, this one person might, but would other people do it? Are you using nightly releases now to check? What would your workflow look like? How would it affect it? Like, those would be some good questions we'd love to know the answers to.
Or did you even know that there is an edge or like now nightly channel that this is even a thing? If not, check it out. Really helpful.
Great, thank you. All right. Should I use state for every API request to mutate result to template? That one went a little above my head, so I'm hoping that y'all understand it.
I'm not sure. Is it about, should I use state for every I request to mutate results template? So
my understanding of this is, so if you perform a fetch request, and this might also not be correct, but I think so if you perform a fetch request on the server, and you do it in your setup function, the same fetch request will happen on the client. And so should you store the result of that request in state somehow? And the answer is absolutely yes, you should. So you should either use async data, which will store it in the page payload, or you should use state and store it, and that will store it in a sort of global application state, which is not persisted across pages, but is stored in a single place. So I would use async data. That's the basic place. That's the basic reason it's created, is for this, if I've understood the question correctly. That makes more sense. Yeah, also to add use fetch, same idea. As we learned earlier in the quiz, for people who are around for the technical difficulties, a little bit of syntactic sugar and nice stuff around use async data, $fetch. So yeah, use fetch also a very good opportunity there, doing the same thing, storing that and actually ensuring that the data will be transferred from server to client. I really enjoyed that Q&A, like answering the questions. I'd be like, I know this. I know this one too. It's like the world's best quiz. It's like, what is the pages direction? And it would ask questions like, I did that. I know that. Like, what is your level of expertise when you enter the pub quiz? Well, definitely on like the different bits of a Nuxt application, but for some reason they never ask those in the pub quizzes. So Jen, we need to get you in to somehow make
ask those questions.
Expertise. Exactly.
All right.
We should do a Nuxt pub quiz, actually. That would be fun.
Nuxt pub quiz.
That would be a really fun event. I would love that.
We could do a virtual one, and people could just prepare their drinks, and it'll be because it would be. Oh yes.
I think it would be a really cool event.
It would definitely be fun, wouldn't it?
I would really love that. Yeah.
And also, can you imagine telling your friends like what you were doing? What were you doing?
Just bring. Oh, we go to a virtual pub quiz today, and it's like they didn't even ask what it's about, and they arrive. And like, oh, yes.
I like it. Okay. Any plan for Nuxt using Vue Vapor mode when released?
Yeah, that is also a kind of a question coming up more often now. Was also there 2 days ago, and as there is no public information unless Vapor mode is coming and the brief idea. Let's just say, let's wait until there's some demo that you can try out. There's something that you can actually grasp. And of course, it's a Vue feature, so it would be too bad if Nuxt wouldn't support that. So of course, as soon as that will be a thing, and even before I want to work on making that available to all the users and in the whole Nuxt ecosystem, make sure that it fits in.
I think I can safely say that as soon as it is possible for anybody to use Vue Vapor mode, Nuxt will make it possible for you to use Vue Vapor mode.
Yep.
If only because we are highly it's very interesting, and Vapor mode is really exciting, and it's exciting for us as well. So
By the way, we have also people already writing they would be in for the pub quiz. So just saying.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
Stay
This
tuned.
is also very good to know. We may or may not have beta releases, but we're definitely having a pub quiz in advance of future minor releases. So that's the plan.
It'll be a lot of fun. All right. So up next, we only have a couple more questions left. What's the best approach to work with solid architecture in Nuxt 3? No one go first. Like, should we pick on Pooya just because Pooya hasn't had to answer a lot of questions yet? Just like throw you a curveball that.
But you can answer it while I quickly Google solid architecture.
Yeah, I was saying let's just quickly. I know what solid means. I was back in the computer science course. I was there when it was explained. So that's for that. But I mean, it's in general more like an architecture pattern that goes across the whole application anyway. So though I still wouldn't say let's start using classes all over the place, especially because they're not really serializable and are sometimes more boilerplate than necessary. But that's just my personal opinion on that.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit tricky to map this because it's coming from object-oriented kind of mindset. It just reminded that we have university days. While more JavaScript, and especially thanks to what Ivan made possible for Vue 3 with composition API, the patterns that we are using, they are more functional, and they are even more encouraged to be functional. They use also dependency injection kind of, which, well, I would say it's kind of conflicting with the side mindset. So yeah, personally, I wouldn't say a one-to-one map to see how we can have a solid architecture in Nuxt. Maybe we can implement it.
Yeah, I think I would definitely say there are different patterns that would be more interesting to talk about in terms of things like instances, which are relevant for Vue, things like and particularly like a context, rather than thinking about dependency injection or something like that. Like it feels like that, and just the way composables work. And auto imports work as well. Like it's a different set of things to talk about. And I mean I don't know why you would want to impose a particular architecture pattern on Vue, which might not necessarily suit it. Anyway,
I mean, we have the eye with provide inject in Vue included itself, though it's, I think, more used with like libraries than with the end user doing it. But yeah, I also think that, like, especially because it is a popular trend to just say like, okay, whatever we do in the backend, let's try to copy that into the front end, and then we end up with things that we really don't want. I don't think it makes much sense. I'd be more curious about how to apply domain-driven design, for example, with Nuxt layers, and how to apply that, or like a hexagonal architecture, and so on, so on. That would be more interesting, as Daniel said.
Interesting. Okay. Second to last question. They're pretty sure that Nuxt content is only local, but is there going to be a way to fetch data from an API in the future?
It is. I think I shortly mentioned it in one of the comments also in the chat.
Oh, perfect.
But it's I think it's kind of a hidden feature that we made it possible for Nuxt. But because of the magic that Nuxt content is depending on the storage API of the Nitro, and storage API is built on top of the unstorage. So by default, the configuration that Nuxt content provides is using local file system API. When we are building the content, when we are processing the content, the source is file system. But there's a feature in Nuxt content module called remote sources, which is easily possible. So you can basically mount a driver that is a remote source. It could be GitHub, it could be a custom API, it could be almost everything that you can imagine, or you can do your own custom source, and then feed it to the Nuxt content. So it is in some sort possible to also feed the external APIs. What is not directly possible is to convert an external CMS, for example, WordPress API to the content module. We need a middle layer, like a driver that can translate it to the Nuxt content. And I'm pretty sure maybe Sébastien has some better vision for the next major versions of Nuxt content to make it possible. But just to say, it is possible today, and not only possible, we are leveraging it for Nuxt documentation infrastructure.
Great, thank you. And yes, Sébastien had to leave today because everything got delayed, and that happens. So hopefully we hear more about this in the future from him. Last question. What are 3 no-brainer steps someone should take to make their Nuxt site more performant?
3 of each of us, or one of each of us? How would
I
do
kind
it?
of like the 3 from each of you. You offered that, so I'm going to take that.
Or like, let's just go round and round until we have no ideas anymore, because I think there can be more than 9. I would start very simple. Very sorry that I take it straight away. Use the Nuxt analyze command to actually figure out how big your bundle is, what's in there. It's actually one of the issues or discussions I answered today about why is the entry bundle so big? Big as in 50 kilobytes gzip, which is not that big. And it's like, okay, use that command, figure out, oh yeah, it's Vue, a few Nuxt.js and UnJS libraries, and there you go. Mostly any image you add is probably bigger, but still for everything you add, every dependency you use, you should check out what's maybe actually a big thing you can optimize or like replace with a more tree shakeable dependency, and so on and so on.
I absolutely love Lighthouse and page speed as well. Really worth seeing it, but absolutely nothing beats getting into the bundles and just checking, because the adding lots of extra code, we as developers are our own worst enemy, because we need a carousel, and so I'm going to use this carousel library from npm, and I need to do this other thing, QR code generator, and I'm going to pull this one over here, and you end up having like, why is my bundle so big? Well, the reason is because of the things we added. And looking in the bundle is very helpful for seeing what it is, and will drive you to probably make different choices as well when you pick libraries. I can recommend UQR for QR code generation, for example, from Anthony and Pooya as well. So that's definitely worth checking. I would obviously mention Fontaine again at this point, but I would also say that you should look at your data fetching. One easy no-brainer step is use Nitro API routes and enable SWR on them by default if they're not state dependent or auth dependent. So you can turn, because the biggest delay in terms of server response tends to be data fetching, API calls that your server is making. So Nitro is incredibly fast. Nitro is just going to send you a response back in single-digit milliseconds. So if it's longer than that, it's probably because there is something, well, maybe 20 milliseconds. Like if it's longer than that, it's going to be other API requests, and you can cache them easily and constantly revalidate them with single option SWR true, and you can apply it in your root rules like API ** SWR true, or you can apply it in the API handler itself and just create a little backend for front end for yourself. For every API request you need, you can easily do that, and it will make your site so immediately responsive and fast. You won't believe, like, your 10-second round trip to your API will turn into instant. So that's very definitely a no-brainer step, and it doesn't require much work at all from your end, just a lot of work from Pooya on the other end. And what else would I do? I would also not initialize stuff in your Nuxt plugins. Everything you do in a Nuxt plugin runs before your app hydrates, which means that it's always going to delay interactivity for your users. We ship an on Nuxt ready composable or utility. It can be run anywhere. It can be run anywhere because it only runs on the client side of your app. And basically that will guarantee that any code in there actually only runs once your app is already hydrated and interactive. So what you can do is any tracking scripts, any DOM manipulator, like whatever you need to do that's big and heavy, put it in an on Nuxt ready and just push it after your app is interactive rather than making everything wait on it. That is also a no-brainer, I think, for a lot of code.
Thank you. Pooya, what you got for us?
Yeah, I think Daniel told almost all the good points. To emphasize one of the things that Daniel also slightly mentioned is that try to avoid global logic as much as possible. There are many different choices like choosing React or Vue or choosing a different library for being faster. But often of the times, these are slight oversights. But one of the main things that always causes significant delays and bad user experiences is the global things that we add, like initializer third-party scripts that we add, like the heavy loading scripts we add. Even on the server side, one of the emphases that we really are trying to put users is to lazy initialize a database. And this is also the secret sauce behind Nuxt 3, that's why everything in the stack is fast, because we are lazy. We lazy initialize everything. So as much as you can try to avoid them and migrate to the composition API, just require the composables and async APIs that when we need them. And on top of that, leverage the caching API, as Daniel mentioned, via Nitro server routes and caching. I think it solves most of the performance problems that I usually see in the projects. And the second part is that, although again mentioned, whenever I try to check a client project, like a company project, the first thing I always check is the Nuxt configuration. Because ideally for me, we basically make everything possible. If Nuxt configuration is big, if there is one more line inside it, there's probably something wrong. An ideal Nuxt project should be just modules probably and a few lines of configuration, because that's the aim of Nuxt, to be zero configuration, to provide everything out of the box with defaults and optimizations. And as long as you can make it smaller, no configuration, I think we can guarantee you the best performance possible. That's Nuxt core.
So TLDR, just hide all your configs in a custom module. Nah, just kidding. And I think even to add on that, there are lots of more no-brainers, like, I don't know, use like the lazy prefix for all the components that are below the fold, so they don't load like with the same priority. Use like Nuxt image and maybe some other service for images to serve them correctly, because nobody wants like 2 megabytes of image for like 200 kilobytes of JavaScript and them loading for ages, and so on, so on. I think there are lots of really good performance gains possible that are just there out of the box, or like with a simple module.
Great. Thank you all. I know that we did end up going through quite a few of them there, and thank you, and so many questions for the three of you. Is there anything that you three wanted to be asked or that we missed out that you wanted to answer before we let you go?
I would say if there are any more questions, then just post them on the chat, or we have GitHub discussions, or we have a Discord where lots of nice people will mostly answer them. I'll also be around chat today, tomorrow, and GitHub Discord as well. Same for Daniel and Pooya, basically all around there. So if there's something left that's unclear, or just do that or drop us a message.
It's worth saying that all three of us are giving talks tomorrow. So
True.
we also have an opportunity to say anything that we haven't said today. So let us know if you've got any questions. Think fondly of us as we put the finishing touches on our slides, because this is very much not done for any of us, I suspect.
You suspect, right?
Exactly. We know each other quite well. So yes, let's see you tomorrow for sure.
Yes. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Bye.
Likewise. Bye-bye. See ya.